It's time for ACC Central, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Monty Taylor and Jake the Jester McKeever.
Welcome back, college baseball fans, especially ACC fans. I am once again joined by Jake the Jester McKeever. He's back. He's talking ACC baseball. Jake, how are you doing, buddy?
Monty, great to have me. I do want to say
great to have me.
that see Monty in the Oma Pack shirt, which is what he did in the intro. He's had this intro in the works for a while, so don't think he just took these pictures right beforehand. But that made me laugh when I saw the Oma Pack shirt. I was like, is he wearing that shirt right now?
I laughed because when I put it together, I saw that I'd done that, and I was like, I don't care. Because I think for one of my last week, one of the shows for the football show for Just Means Less, I was wearing a Hurricane shirt, and that's the other shirt I'm wearing in the intro. So pretty funny. But yeah, we're here to talk some fall baseball. Micah might join. I put the offer out to him. But he's a busy guy. He's moved to your neck of the woods, and he's also focused on football. So if he pops in, he pops in. But right now, it's just me and you.
Yeah, he's in ACC country now, kind of. Not ACC baseball country, but yeah, he set up his podcast studio. So he said he might join, he might not. But yeah, before we jump into that, the newbies are in Cal, Stanford, SMU. SMU doesn't have baseball, so we won't be talking about them tonight, unfortunately.
No, I keep forgetting about them because they don't have baseball. So when I do the football stuff, I'm very confused. But yeah, no, we're here to talk about some new faces, some new places. You've already mentioned the new places. It's super exciting stuff. I can't wait to dive into this. We've got 16 teams to talk about, and there's a ton of new faces. Before we jump into this too much, it's been a while since you've been on the ACC show. What have you been up to, Jake?
Yeah, I think the last time I saw you was when at the ACC funeral after Florida State got eliminated up in Omaha, and Monty was sad, probably a lot longer than I think some of the Florida State staffers. Following the SEC, we had one more game and then the summer ball stuff, but I'm excited to talk some ACC. I mean, so many of these teams are constructed in such a variety of different ways, variety of different climates. I mean, Penn State, Boston College have completely different roster structures and coaching staffs than Florida State. It really is the most diverse group of college baseball programs in the country, and I'm just excited to kind of jump into it and talk through some of these rosters.
I think you just had a slip of the tongue. Did you? Who did you mean instead of Penn State? You said Penn State and Boston College.
Pitt.
Pitt. There we go. Okay, I heard. I was like, oh, Mike Gambino connection, but Penn State is not in the ACC.
There are some. There's a Penn State transfer that I'm really intrigued to talk about too, Monty.
That's true.
There, yeah. But I mean, it really, especially with the coast to coast stuff, Stanford, Cal. I mean, just going through some of the deep dives, it's insane how many different ways there are to construct a roster. And it feels like every ACC team is constructing a roster in a different way. I mean, you have somebody that's exclusively relying on the portal like Miami, taking in 13 transfers and only 5 high school kids. Pitt doing the same way. And then the complete inverse of that, Stanford doesn't take in a single transfer. All their stuff is going to be through the freshman class coming in. There's a little bit of, stuff in the middle. Georgia Tech's another one that's kind of like that, but it's just really exciting to see because there's 100 different ways to win a baseball game, and it feels like you need every single one in the ACC this year.
Yep, and fall ball is upon us. We're going to be using rankings. When I talk about rankings, we're going to be using the ones on screen. If it's for transfers, it's going to be 64 Analytics, their rankings that they've done. And if it's new recruits, it's going to be using Perfect Game. So we might allude to some other rankings while we're talking, but the ones that are on screen, those are the ones we're talking about on screen. We might mention prep baseball. D1 has gotten some impact transfers as well, talking about pitchers. So lots to talk about as we start fall ball. And for the most part, we don't know much of anything new about these guys, right? Most of the teams, we haven't seen too much out there. I've seen a little bit of stuff from Florida State. I've seen a little bit of stuff from Louisville because Louisville's had 2 scrimmages. But for the most part, most teams have not started scrimmaging yet.
I mean, I've seen a ton out of Florida State.
Shout out to Brett, who is.
Yeah, I would just say shout out to Brett because he's posted a ton of stuff around Florida State. So they're honestly, I probably know more about them than a lot of the SEC schools just because they're getting the most action out of that. And then again, like you said, Louisville's another one. But I know that there's a ton of unknowns, and there's a few guys I got when I was doing this deep dive that I got to see some videos on. But there's some guys like Josiah Ragsdale out of Iona, Patrick Gardner from FDU that are completely unknowns, and we have to go by stats. So really excited to kind of see some of these fall balls as, these marketing teams and these media teams in the ACC do a tremendous job.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to talk about. We're not going to spend as much time. We're going to talk about these guys a ton once we get to you and I doing our deep dives ahead of next season. So it'll be interesting to see how much information we glean from fall ball and different reports and stuff like that as we approach, the regular season next year. But for now, this is a weekly show for the month of October and maybe a little bit of November. As we're going to be talking about these. First, we're doing this transfer and recruiting show today. We're going to be talking about the scrimmages. We're going to be talking about position battles, various different things. Jake and I, and hope, if Micah or Nick want to be involved, they're welcome to as well. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of wide open rosters, and we'll probably allude to a lot of that as we go into this. But let's start off and talk about the transfer rankings. Okay, here we go. These are our top the rankings for each school. Their overall rankings. Miami had the 7th best according to 64 Analytics. Wake Forest next with 9. All the way down the line. You have Stanford unranked because, as Jake just mentioned, they didn't bring in any transfers. They did end up losing 2 transfers, I believe. But for the most part, they're relying mostly on freshmen and the returners. But what jumps out, to you on this list, Jake? What's your most surprising team on this list, do you think?
I mean, obviously Miami. I mean, they're a team that needs a complete roster overhaul as they lost a ton of their staff. That was kind of the strength of that team. There's a lot of these teams that I think are trying to make a Florida State-esque jump out of the transfer portal, as we saw Florida State have a ton of success out of that. Clemson being down at 36, that film was a little bit low for me, as I felt like they were very strategic with some of the guys that they brought in to fill some of the holes that they have. I think that they have 3 plug-and-play starters that they got out of the portal. And then Stanford down there at David Esker. It kind of just alludes to a little bit of just the disconnect between some of these schools that, are really kind of hemorrhaged, like Stanford, Notre Dame, and Cal, about bringing in transfers, how hard and difficult it is to find the right one. And David Esker is just that old school guy. He's going to get his guys and put the balls on the field. And obviously their kind of quote unquote big transfer is a freshman. So still some exciting new faces. But yeah, I'm really excited to kind of see the steps that Clemson takes from a transfer standpoint. They have a ton of talented guys.
That is what's going to be interesting when we get to the high school rankings for Stanford, because the high school rankings don't take into account Rintaro Sasaki, even though he's a freshman. So we'll have to keep that in mind when we talk about Stanford's freshman rankings, because Sasaki, I would think, would be a top 10 freshman recruit, but because he's international, he doesn't fall under that. My biggest surprise is Pitt in there, Pitt as a top 20 transfer class. We'll deep dive into some of these guys, but they bring in some pitching, but they also bring in, somebody like Lorenzo Carrier from Miami, who's somebody that has a really high ceiling that he's never really met yet. But, you add in the, Patrick Gardner from FDU, a former teammate of Luke Cantwell, who's back. That was really surprising to me. But, NC State, when I originally did these rankings, they actually were in the, ahead of North Carolina. But they had a transfer that was coming from Campbell that ultimately ended up staying at Campbell, so they dropped down to 78. But they've got a ton of high upside guys that, I think will, I wouldn't put too much stock in these rankings once you see where some of the players that you might be excited about might have ended up being ranked by 64 Analytics, because some of these rankings are a little bit harsher than you would think they were.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of guys with Ivy League experience that are coming into the ACC. a few guys from UNCG, a team that knocked off Wake Forest. Obviously, a ton of FDU. Indiana State, I think, has 2 that are coming into the ACC. So, yeah, like you said, take the rankings with a grain of salt, because I know that was the one thing that we were talking with coaches in Omaha. They use completely different metrics to grade people, and they really are looking for people to kind of fill holes and plug and play. So, obviously, the needs of a school like Miami aren't really going to line up with the needs of a school like Clemson. So, again, it really is kind of looking for the best fit, who can win some of these jobs that are on campus and who can push these guys to be at the next level.
Well, and look at Duke last year. One of the reasons we doubted some of their offense going into the season is because they relied on a guy from VMI, a guy from Harvard, a guy from Penn, and those guys had monster seasons, all near 20 home runs and over 300.
Yeah, and a guy from Oklahoma too, Monty.
Yeah, but he's back. But like the Oklahoma guy is not the one that you would have been like, I don't know about him. He's from Oklahoma. You kind of doubted the Ivy League pedigree going up a step.
I mean, we did the same thing with Virginia too, and they were a team that made it to Omaha, and the magic or secret sauce that they can find in their transfers is really commendable, because again, that's not really something that O'Connell really stresses on. But there's weekend guys that have been from the D2 ranks. I know that Cal has a few D2 guys that are coming in, but yeah, it really is kind of a weird thing where you never know who's going to take the grain of salt. And then the flip side of that is, I mean, the Duke transfer to Texas last year didn't even play a single inning for them, and he was a really highly rated recruit. So the shuffle between the next level, it's always kind of one thing to track, just to see kind of how somebody does it when the lights get a little bit brighter.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about anything or want to comment on anything, feel free to jump in the comments. We share them on the screen a lot of times. We're happy to take any questions, but this is a fun interactive show because we are in fall ball season. We can talk college baseball. I know everyone's kind of focused on football, including Jake, but we've got plenty to talk about here. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the recruiting rankings. And again, we're using Perfect Games rankings here. Georgia Tech comes in at number 2. These are their top prospects after they have after the draft and signing period. So now all those guys are on campus. Every one of them on that right column is on campus. I'm not sure whether the rankings were taken into effect before, but Georgia Tech has 22 high school commits. That's absurd. They do have their fall roster up but it's only the returners, and there's only 16 guys coming back for Georgia Tech. So a lot of new faces in Atlanta.
Yeah, a lot of these coaches do kind of not necessarily over recruit, but they are going to have to get down to that roster limit. Pitt, like we kind of hinted at, only bringing in 6 high school recruits. I'm really excited to kind of see Georgia Tech, because that was the MO that they had last year, is that they were such a young team. There's a few guys that I really am surprised kind of make it to campus there. Drew Rogers is honestly the big fish that there was a little bit surprised that made it to Georgia Tech in a good way, as he was going to get drafted. Florida State kind of going with the high school commit as well. Low numbers, but really high volume, really high-end guys. A lot of guys that they're really high on around that program when you talk to a few guys there. Notre Dame kind of in that middle of the pack. Did it surprise you a little bit that they out-recruited some of the schools like NC State, Duke, Boston College, Notre Dame as high as they are?
Well, NC State had such a big class last year. I mean, when we look at their roster in the deep dive, you're going to see, and a bunch of the transfers they brought in are for that 2026 class, 2026 junior draft class, 2027, I think, overall. But, I'm a little surprised, but Notre Dame needed to do some business. They lost a lot of guys. They didn't get a ton of transfers, as you saw on the previous screen. So they had their work cut out. And Pittsburgh actually had some really quality guys that were going to come to campus, but they got signed. I think they had 3 guys that were higher draft picks that ended up getting signed. Because I remember seeing a couple of pretty high-end recruits committed to Pitt, but unfortunately they got drafted, and that's the way it goes. I was surprised Virginia was out of the top 25. I mean, they had 7 guys that could have been drafted, and they ultimately get 4 of them to campus. So I was surprised that they were outside the top 25 with that kind of,
I know they had Lee Stowers. He was committed to Virginia Tech for a little bit. Lee Stowers showed it up at North Carolina.
Virginia, I was talking about.
What?
Virginia.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Virginia Tech. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. I just wanted to make sure you either had a slip or we were talking about different things. Because I was talking about Virginia because they had 4 guys get on campus. Florida State, I think they would have a top 25 recruiting class if you included JUCOs, because I think they've got 4 or 5 JUCOs that are really quality guys.
I think Perfect Game had them as top 10 for average too as well. They're average really high. So like.
And they had a couple of guys get drafted, and obviously we know what they lost in terms of some of their leadership. They have some really quality players coming back. But, yeah, I'm really excited about this. Wake Forest also had 2 big-name pitchers coming back. I think Chris Lavonis got drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round and ended up staying, making it to campus, which is really impressive, and that's really exciting stuff. So, lots to be excited about in terms of the freshman talent. We obviously had a ton of freshmen last year in the ACC just absolutely ball out, and I think we've got a good number of guys that could do the same this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a ton of guys that we talk about that really are going to press for playing time against incumbents. But just for the fans of our show out there, I think high school recruiting is probably the hardest thing to do as a coaching staff, because you want to get people that you think will be good fits culturally, but you also don't want them to be too good to where the MLB draft does it. You have to kind of go and scramble down the stretch. So again, credit to a lot of these schools at the top is, again, it's not an easy thing to do to go in and recruit at the top 10 class, regardless of the division. It really is kind of a balancing act.
Yeah, and it's really exciting stuff. We'll look at the top 10 transfers. Again, we're going back to transfers real quick before we go to the top 10 overall recruits. But the number 1 ACC transfer coming in, according to 64 Analytics, is Kane Kepley. He broke the walks record in the Cape Cod League for the who was he playing for? Hyannis Harbor Hawks. He I think walked almost 40 times this summer for them. Really good center fielder from Liberty. And then, Evan Crest out of Jacksonville, not the best numbers, but he's somebody that they're really high on. Who really stands out to you on this list, and who's not on this list that you would have expected to be on this list?
I mean, the big one obviously is Luke Gaffney. I know that he was one that a ton of SEC coaches that I too really coveted. I think the quote that I had heard was plug and play. He'd be an everyday first baseman just about anywhere that he transferred to. He's one that I'm a little bit surprised on here. And then the one that jumps out to me is just Todd Hudson. Sorry, I got some notes here on Todd Hudson. I mean, lefty bat, added some power numbers there in that second swing. Long swing, so that's the only thing you kind of have to worry about is as he takes the step up, is it going to be something that he translates a really, really good gap-to-gap hitter? I know it says outfield, but he's not really a speedster. He's definitely going to be more of a corner outfield. But Todd Hudson's some guy that I can be kind of keeping my eye on down there in Miami.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because the guy I'm going with, Luke Gaffney's a good one. Purdue to Clemson. Clemson does have 2 guys on here, Don Listy and Colin Priest. But the guy for me, Ethan Conrad, who might be a first-round draft pick for Wake Forest. He's a Marist transfer. Really, really good. One of the benefits of covering the Cape Cod League is getting to see some of these transfers in action. And Ethan Conrad was absolutely electric for the Bourne Braves. One of the best players in the league. I think he finished 2nd for the batting title. He had 20-plus stolen bases or something like that. Might have been 19. Could hit for power. Just a really exciting addition for Wake Forest. I was surprised he's not on this list. He's not Wake Forest's top recruit either, or top transfer. I think they gave that to Matt Bedford. Let me go back and see what they did.
Yeah, it was Bedford, which
is a very good one, but it's, we've got some interesting things to talk about with Wake Forest. But yeah, it's a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of exciting transfers in here. And we're going to talk about each team individually in a little bit here. So moving on to the top recruits, Florida State gets 2 guys in here. Well, I guess, there he is, Miles Bailey and Hunter Carnes on campus. They are 2 of the top 10. You also have 2 Wake Forest guys, 2 pitchers. I mentioned them previously, Chris Lavonis and Duncan Marston. Tyler Head's a guy at NC State that might be starting in center field for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton to like here. Drew Rogers was somebody I think that caught a lot of people off guard that he ended up going to Georgia Tech, because I know that there were a lot of scouts that were really, really high on him. Elijah Clayton, I think, is another one to watch out for at Cal. He's kind of the biggest recruit there that they've had in a long, long time. He's a big league pedigree. When we get more into Cal stuff, I'll talk about him more. But I mean, yeah, there's a ton of guys here that I think have the potential to be first team All ACC, not just All ACC freshmen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're trying to talk about these guys. We can't prognosticate too much because we don't know how they're going to be used. You might have guys that sit for a while as they adapt to the ACC, but you might have guys that get thrown in the fire and are electric.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always Mark's quote is that availability is the best trait to predict an all freshman team. That's gonna be the one thing is who wins these position battles. You almost are tempted to go with an outfielder just because they have 3 spots versus a catcher who only has 1, maybe 2 spots. But again, availability is the quickest way to get all ACC.
Yeah, and Hunter Carnes is going to be behind Jackson West, but I don't know how much they're going to play Jackson West every day, give him some rest. I mean, college is a little different from the pros because if there are times where you can literally play your catcher every day. We saw that at Virginia with Kyle Teal. We've seen it with other catchers. So it'll be interesting to see, how that works. But Charlie Bates is another name, the Stanford shortstop that could start day one at shortstop for the Cardinal.
Yeah, Stanford brought in a ton of talented guys, like you said. Sasaki, I think is how you pronounce it. By the end of this episode, I'm going to learn how to pronounce it. But again, Stanford was a roster where they lost their best player, Nakamura, to the MLB draft. It was a team that really took a tremendous step back and is kind of looking for a new identity and a new conference. And I think it starts with the freshman recruits that they bring in. Because again, Stanford's kind of predicated on themselves as kind of the traveling road show. We don't play in front of anybody at home. We don't play in front of anybody on the road. And that's going to be tested in the ACC.
Just taking shots. Jeez.
No. I did not mean that in a derogatory way. I meant that as, we control what we can control kind of way.
All right, let's dive into the whole picture here with Boston College. Boston College brings in a guy like Josiah Ragsdale. If you guys didn't know, he was our Boston College player of the summer. He had a big season for the up in the New England League. He comes from Iona. Jake mentioned him a little bit earlier. Really excited.
Not a lot of film on him. Mr. Everything in Iona, though, according to their website, led the team in home runs, stolen base, single season hits leader in Iona history. So a ton of pedigree coming in. I do think it's kind of crazy, though, that he committed to a school that only won 1 game his senior year of high school. And to come out and ball out the way that he did, I think is just an incredible testament to his resilience as a player. And I'm really excited to see what he does at Boston College going forward. Jack Toomey, he took a step back in 2024. He's going to be moving down the road about 45 minutes east as he was at Holy Cross. 2023, he was the freshman Patriot League Player of the Year. So exciting stuff to see from him. You don't know if maybe sometimes these players have 1 foot out the door. They're starting to look for transfers, and that's kind of where they go. But those are the 2 that really jump out to me on this list.
Yeah, and Gunnar Johnson, I see that ranking's a bit low on him. He's intriguing because I talked to Patrick Roach, who is third baseman for BC. He's a grad student now. He mentioned that it's their second year with Todd Interdonato, but Gunnar Johnson comes in. It's his first year at BC, but it'll be his 4th year in Todd Interdonato's system, and that's a really big boost for them because he comes in behind the plate from Wofford, formerly one of Interdonato's players, and could be an important piece for them, even though they have the likes of Beck Milner, who's also coming back behind the plate.
Yeah, Gunnar Johnson's really intriguing one. He hit 380 in very limited action before getting injured and missing the rest of 2024. I think he only played about 3 weeks. 2023, he was DHing a ton because he was injured as well. So there is a little bit of a concern there from a health standpoint. But outside of that, I mean, Gunnar Johnson's one of those guys that can even DH from a catching spot. He's been in Arenado's system a super long time. So he's going to help with the pitching staff going forward. I mean, I know that these aren't 3 guys that are going to jump out at you. These aren't the top-ranked guys, but these are guys that I think fit into the Boston College system really well, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, being a northern school that's playing a lot of these southern schools. I mean, you have to be resilient. You have to be mature in order to hit in the cage and get ready for these spring games.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see those two. I think Ragsdale and Toomey are going to go right in there. The infield's pretty much set because you return basically the same guys you've had for the last 2 or 3 years. So you're not going to see, I think, a lot of the freshmen get playing time. You might see Julio Soler force his way in there if somebody's struggling or gets injured. But for the most part, Boston College is returning a lot of their infield, but the outfield is in question with the loss of Cam Leary, Barry Walsh, who was injured a lot of last season, but is gone. You've got Adam Magpaw coming back, but I think the outfield's kind of open. But where Boston College fell short a lot last year was the pitching staff. They lose John West, but is one of these transfers pitchers going to stand out to you? Do you think their depth has improved from last season?
Yeah, I mean, that was the one kind of Achilles heel of Boston College, which they had John West, and they really didn't have anybody outside of that. Alex Bryant, I think, is going to be the guy that eats a lot of these innings. I think he's going to kind of be in that second starter, first guy out of the bullpen role. I think Carl Meyer is another underrated arm to kind of watch. He's kind of more of a finesse arm, not really a ton of power. And then John Mass, I'm really interested to see kind of how some of these guys get used. Mason Clark, too, to some extent, just because it really is kind of hard to track high school guys in terms that play positions and pitch. It seems like they almost have to pick one. But again, especially catcher, too, with Mason Clark, that's going to be the one thing that they track because, again, BC doesn't need an infielder. They need pitching. So maybe that'll be the quickest way for the field for John Mass.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm excited to see if they've got more depth, especially with Tyler Mudd back from injury as well. I think he came back at the end of last season, but they still return a lot of other pitchers as well. So hopefully they can get a boost there on the pitching staff.
I do have a Monty meme alert. There's a few of these that I kind of highlighted that I think will be future Monty memes. John Mass, the mass hole, when he goes in and shuts down games. So.
I'm not sure that's appropriate enough to use as a meme. I got to keep it tasteful, but it's a good one. Now there's a lot of
for you, buddy,
yeah.
Really jumped out to me.
Good. Make sure I'm glad you've taken notes. All right, moving along to Cal. We talked about Cal. They were one of the lower ranked teams in the transfer and recruiting space, but they bring in some talent. Alex Burge is a guy that I highlight. I know the ranking isn't great there, but he was at Wichita State, had a pretty good season there. He might come in and be the everyday catcher. He's got some competition because they've got to replace Caleb Loma Levita, who is now with the Washington Nationals organization. Who, you talked about Elijah Clayton, and I want to get into Elijah Clayton in a second, but who are the transfers, position players wise, jumps out to you?
Jacob French is making that short drive across the bay. I think that's going to be a common theme with a few of these guys. As he was at San Francisco State last year, which is, I believe, a D2 transfer. He's going to be kind of their hottest one coming in. Can he take that step up? There's a lot of guys too. David Shaw, he was at Rice and then he was at Texas. The electric stuff, I think, is there. He struggled with a little bit of the walks. The Texas pitching staff last year was definitely kind of an interesting thing. But David Shaw at the peak is definitely somebody that you can go out and count on to get you 9 outs every single weekend if he can get the walks under control. That was really his Achilles heel the last 2 years, is when he's pounding the zone, he's great. But when he's walking people, that's when he kind of gets himself into trouble.
Yeah, and Elijah Clayton is interesting because he's their highest ranked recruit. And he, right now, Cal doesn't return a ton of guys, but the guys they do return are at second, short, and third base.
I should say about Elijah Clayton, just when I saw some of the perfect game film on him, I think he needs to grow into his body a little bit. And as he gets into a Cal system, and I think he just plays every day, the game slows down for him. He puts on a little bit of muscle, but he has a ton of power for as little and lanky as he looks in like a good way. Like he looks like he'd be a prototypical middle infielder that's really quick, can kind of pepper the gaps, but he has a ton of power on the back end. And again, I think he's one guy that you can kind of watch where he maybe redshirts this year, but going forward, I think he's going to be a tremendous, tremendous talent for Cal. And again, the big league pedigree of Royce Clayton, which Monty, I was watching this, that I thought this was kind of interesting. Did you know Royce Clayton was the shortstop in Moneyball for the Oakland Athletics?
I did know that.
He stood in as an actor. Kalen Applefield, I think, is another guy to kind of watch and track. He has a short, quick swing. It's a big kind of timing swing when he gets it in the zone, but it's short, quick. It has a ton of pop. He has tremendous, tremendous backspin on the ball, and he's somebody that I could see fitting into a Cal lineup going forward. I think that they use him primarily as an outfielder, as I think he's a little bit too athletic to be behind the plate. But Kalen Applefield's kind of another guy that I really want to circle that I think has a chance to kind of be in the freshman ACC team just because of the availability aspect of Cal.
Now, you're a Texas A&M guy. Do you know anything about Carl Schmidt?
I don't. Should I?
I mean, apparently he transferred in, but he's still listed as a freshman, so I'm not sure if that's a redshirt situation or what happened there. I did hear some good things about his start from Jared Avincula. That's an interview that's coming out in a couple of weeks, by the way. I just realized I was referencing an interview that hasn't been released yet. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think California is going to be they're going to be kind of transitioning, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the ACC because it's going to be a slog. For that adjustment, I think there's no really easy wins. I mean, we see, California, a team that they faced Pittsburgh last year and got blown out.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that we always kept giving Mark a whole bunch of crap about. The schedule is going to be very, very tough for Cal. It'll be interesting to see as the schedules kind of come out going forward if this is something that I think that they get used to, kind of like we noticed with Stanford when they would go and do these kind of cross-country road trips, or if this is something that kind of becomes the demise of Cal baseball. Because, again, we mentioned it with Stanford, but Cal really is at a crossroads because the talent does take a big, big step up in the ACC as opposed to the Pac. They're losing Lamavita, who was, a mainstay, probably one of the best Cal players. But, again, I really like the coaching staff that Cal brings in. I really like Brett Wallace, the hitting coach. He's another guy with major league pedigree. I think that they're set up for success, but you have to wonder about just the talent aspect of Cal. It does feel like they are going to be at a disadvantage from a talent standpoint.
Well, and you know what else I hope they bring into the ACC in terms of baseball? The Calgorithm.
The Calgorithm.
I need Cal Twitter to maintain the energy they've got right now during football season. I need them to maintain it in the spring.
That is kind of ironic that their football team's doing as good as they are, because it is going to be very similar stuff that we talk about, where they are going to be a completely different style of baseball that's coming in. NorCal baseball is completely different than Southeast baseball. So I'm excited to kind of see how it translates because, again, it's going to be sink or swim for Cal baseball.
Clemson's got a lot of good-looking stuff as well. We mentioned three guys when we brought up the top 10. They have Colin Priest, who's coming over from Michigan. Luke Gaffney, who you mentioned, somehow he's ranked 133. Dom Listy from Indiana State. And the other thing you need to remember, Andrew Sifo is coming back from injury. So that's your shortstop right there. Josh Pano, who can play the infield at a variety of positions. Just really, really good-looking stuff. But I'm going to circle – You know what? You go first. Give me your one name. I've got mine.
Colin Priest is a guy that when I saw Michigan down in Texas at the beginning of the year, I joked with one of the Michigan beat writers. I was like, "Oh, where do you think he's going to end up?" Because he did kind of feel like he was the best player on Michigan. He has a ton of power. He's a little bit slower, but he gets good back in a lot of the swings that I saw. He has the power to kind of hit it over to all fields. And it's kind of weird that every time we talk about, power to all fields, you think gap to gap, but that really isn't Colin Priest at all. I mean, he's a guy that is going to get double-digit home runs going forward. So I think you almost pencil him in to be a starter for Clemson. I mean, he's going to be a middle of the lineup guy for him.
Yeah, I really like the guy I was going to circle as a pitcher. Michael Gillen is going to bring some depth to that bullpen. He's got a 92, 93 mile an hour fastball, low 80s slider. Mixing those two together, I think he's also got low to mid 80s changeup. Just more depth that they need. And then I really like the under the radar Hudson Lee move from Wake Forest to Clemson. I think he, with a fresh change of scenery, could be a huge talent behind them. But do you see anything in their pitching staff that could see them duplicate the season that Aiden Kanak had last year on the pitching side?
So this one kind of jumped out to me, which, by the way, this is another one of those Monty means, the TP Wentworth 877 cash now.
That's I said Aiden Kanak on the pitching side. You just completely ignored my question.
Well, let me finish. So I think that they use him. And again, I don't have any intel into Clemson, but he's a tremendous pitcher. From what I saw from some of the videos, I think he has the potential to pitch in a Clemson staff, despite him being listed as an outfielder. I mean, he's thrown multiple no-hitters, multiple double Ks. He's going to be somebody that I think you can kind of track going forward, is if they kind of use him in a pitching sense, because I mean, he's a tremendous pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, again, they continue to recruit really well under Bakich. I'm just curious to see how they're going to, use these freshmen because, again, there's some guys that are good enough to play right away. There's some that have to sit a little bit, but then if you sit them, they might get disgruntled and want to transfer. And I'm not always 100% sure of that, but they've got a really good team and should be one of the ACC's best again this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a preseason top 10 team just with the talent that they have. Bakich, I think, has them in a position again with the recruiting that's came in on top of some of the players to push for going to Omaha, which is something that hasn't happened at Clemson in a little bit.
Yeah, and moving along to the
there was one other guy I wanted to talk about, Monty.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry. Austin Jacobs is another one. He has a super, super weird swing, almost Veritek-esque, but it's got a ton of pop, ton of really great gap-to-gap hitter. He's got an advanced approach and as well as a good defender, but he's somebody for the fans out there. You need to go watch Austin Jacobs swing. It's definitely something to marvel at.
I will make note of that when I see Clemson on October 25th when they play each other, I would imagine. Hopefully play each other. I will be in Clemson on the 25th, and I hope they will play. Moving along to the defending ACC tournament champions, it's the Duke Blue Devils. I'm curious on how they're going to handle some of these names because they bring back Ben Miller at third base, and they've got a number of third basemen in there. They've got a number of outfields. Devin Obie, by the way, gone. He's still on campus right now, but he is headed to Georgia as soon as he graduates from Duke in December. So your center fielder's out. You lose your first baseman, your second baseman, and your catcher. But you got Macon Winslow, who's a top catcher. You've got Wally Clark back at shortstop. I know Jake's itching to mention him, even though we're talking transfers.
Yeah.
Ben Miller at third, but then you bring in Jake Berger. You bring in I'm sorry about if I butcher this name, but Nick D. Nicky D. That's what I'm going to go with right there. And then you've got a really good recruit like Jeff Logie. But then you had some guys that broke out. Noah Murray could be in line to start at second base. Sam Harris could be in line to start at first base. Those are guys that didn't play much as freshmen. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the position players duke it out, pun intended. It was actually unintended, but I laughed as I said it. But it's going to be really fun to see.
Yeah. First things first, we are going to have to get a pronunciation guide for Duke baseball.
I think I could sound it out, but the problem is I just got stuck, and then you just I'm like, all I gotta do is get to the Antonio part of it, and then I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I really like Ben Rounds and Jake Berger. These are two Harvard guys. So I guess from one color mascot to another color mascot. Jake Hyde is going to be transferring over from Georgetown. Started 57 games for them. Hit over 310 for them. Again, last year he took a little bit of a step back, but again, I think that's almost expected just due to the kind of randomness of baseball. I think that he kind of gets over that 300 hump. Jay Slater, I think, is going to be the freshman name to watch here. I don't know if he's going to be playing this year, but he has a very, very advanced approach behind the plate, and I think that that's going to translate to the next level. So that's kind of the freshman that you're having me circle there, Monty.
Yeah, the freshmen are interesting because, again, like I just mentioned, Duke has a ton of there's not really a space for freshmen, so it's hard to see. You got to figure out which one's going to get the first opportunity, and it may not be the best player. It may be the one that's takes advantage of the opportunity. But on the pitching side, those two pitchers, Reed Easterly and Mark Hindy, I really like Hindy. William and Mary guy, he's got some starts under his belt. These are veteran guys that don't throw super hard. I want to say that Hindy's an 88 to 90 mile an hour guy with a fastball and a cutter and a slider. I like him a lot. And Duke's pitching staff is typically their strength. Reed Easterly's another guy, 6 foot left-handed guy. He started 11 games out of 13, I think, for Yale, and he brings that experience of being a grad student. I'm really excited to see what they do with these pitchers and see if they can duplicate some of the success they've had over multiple years, especially from, I don't know if you remember, but Charlie Bielenson, you knew I was going to have to mention him. He came from the Ivy League to Duke, and ultimately, he was pretty good his first year, but it was really last year when he was
the second. Yeah, I mean, they're almost turned into a pipeline. And again, there's another name that we're going to need a pronunciation guide there for Marcelo down there.
Mastriani?
Is that how you pronounce that one? Looks a little more intimidating, I guess, than it is. But yeah, I mean, Duke's another one of those programs that when you talk about them with transfers, they have to be very, very selective with the guys that they bring in just due to their academic standards and what they do. So I think that's why they kind of go to that Ivy League well a ton. And again, the other thing too is they're really not going out and getting kind of the Ivy League Player of the Years, the Jackson Appels, the White Henslers, because a lot of those guys end up in the SEC. But they found tremendous value in the guys that they bring in. And they end up pushing and being at all ACC levels, which really is just a tremendous thing to the coaching staff that they are able to go out and kind of find. I wouldn't use the island of the misfit toys because it doesn't feel like it fits here, but they find guys that play Duke baseball.
Yeah, and Duke has a very clear identity. We know Coach Pollard loves to emphasize that blue-collar identity that Duke has. Go to work.
But you're just on point with your mascot puns.
That's not even me. I think that's literally their message. I think that's Duke.
Blue collar.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've just picked up on through social media. But Reed Easterly, going back to him real quick, I think he was the guy that Micah Winslow mentioned, reminded him a lot of who was it last year? Oh, it's going to kill me. But has just that veteran presence with some really interesting stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys settle into the team and who gets the jobs. Because Duke brings back some good experience. Another name that I didn't even get to mention was Jimmy Evans, who had some heroic moments after not playing most of the season last year. So lots to like about Duke. But now we get to go to another fun team, Florida State. And again, shout out to Brett Nevin, 247's beat reporter for Florida State Sports. He is on site tweeting out video after video of Florida State's players. They have a lot of guys coming back from injury. They have a lot of JUCO transfers. They have a lot of freshmen coming in. It's a lot of exciting stuff, even though that you lose Tibbs and Farrer and Marco Dinges and Cam Smith, James Tibbs, one of the two, whichever one I forgot when I first started this list. But
they're both gone.
Yeah, they are both gone. I just couldn't remember which one I started my list with, so I just said both of them again just in case. But talk to me about Gage Harrelson. That's somebody you're very familiar with. He might be slotted to be the starting center fielder.
Yeah, he might be an all Jake team, kind of how Wallace Clark was last year, simply because I got to see them play very, very early on in their careers. The way that Tim Tadlock kind of handled the outfield last year honestly kind of had me scratching my head at times. They had 4 tremendous starting level outfielders, Gage Harrelson being one of them. At times, he kind of felt like he was the odd man out and that he would come in when somebody else was in a slump or something like that. And then the second Gage Harrelson kind of got into something or did something weird, they would yank him immediately. I think, they always say the grass isn't always green on the other side. I don't think that's the case for Gage Harrelson. I think he lucked into a tremendous situation at Florida State. He's a speed guy at center field, like you said. Florida State loves to kind of get that fast guy that can be in the outfield. I think he's going to be the next one in that long one. And like you mentioned, I would say the name that's really jumped out to me out of all those videos is Miles Bailey.
Yeah.
He has pop. And I don't know if Florida State's fixed the fence out there in right field, but I don't think it matters because he's been clearing them, it seems like, almost every day in practice. And somebody that I wish I could watch take BP. He just has a smooth swing.
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun, but that first base opening should be wide open. I have to believe that second base is likely it's going to stay Farrow, Lodies, and then Cal Fisher will slide in at third, but that first base position is probably wide open. With a number of guys, but Miles Bailey, I mean, I tweeted out a video from Brett Nevin a little earlier before this show, and I think you probably saw it, but it had 112 mile an hour exit velocity.
Yeah, for our Florida State fans, it hit the circus tent where it would have been if it was standing. Obviously, they had the tornado there that took it out, but for reference, it would have hit over the street and over kind of the parking lot into the circus tent that they have out there in right field. Just
Yeah,
unreal moonshot.
And before you talk about Noah Sheffield, who I know you're dying to talk about, as he has some major league pedigree as well, but I want to mention these two pitchers, Evan Crest and Mason Martinez. We touched a little bit on Evan Crest earlier when we were talking about our top recruits. His stats don't jump out at you from Jacksonville, but he's impressive. He's got really good stuff, and he's got some pretty good command of, a mid-90s fastball, a slider that's really good, and Canes Cats Heat is late, but don't worry, you haven't missed Miami yet. And then he's got a really good changeup, and I really like what he's got. And Micah Posey has taken guys from smaller schools like Cam Leiter, who didn't have the best stats at UCF, and has really elevated their game. And I think Evan Crest is going to be another one. But Mason Martinez is somebody I watched a lot at VCU, right? He was one of their main pitchers, him and Brian Curley. Brian Curley is now transferred over to Georgia, but I really, really like him. He had a .298 ERA in 42 innings, with 41 strikeouts. They only hit 200 off him. He's got two different breaking balls, good fastball. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do at the next level.
Yeah, I think Evan Crest, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think he's going to be the next long line. He reminds me a ton of almost like a right-handed Parker Messick, just a big, long, loopy, low 90s, but it's going to spot you up. I think he's going to be the guy that they pencil in, either a Friday night, Saturday guy. I think he has a ton. Wes Mendez, I think, is another guy out of the bullpen that's going to be great for Florida State. But, the Noah Sheffield video, the one that I saw, is definitely a little bit funny because you think he's almost just like messing around in the cage. And then you check the last name and you hear how the bat sounds and you hear where the ball comes off the bat. And it's like, oh, this makes sense. Again, it's one of those things where every part of you, as somebody who watches and looks at guys to play at the next level, should tell you that it's not going to work. Like, it's a wild, crazy swing. It feels like he's going to be so out in front. But the timing aspect of getting his foot down, keeping his whole body back, I mean, it's something honestly only a Sheffield could do. And I need to kind of see how Florida State uses him this year.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about Florida State. Again, they've got a ton of talent. It's just, that's what's so fun about fall ball is these teams have so much talent, and it's just trying to figure out who's going to play where. And there's just so much unknown. It's so much fun to just for people like you and I to just sit here and talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, every single freshman that I went and looked at and pulled up stats from in Perfect Game, was hitting the ball plus 95 exit velos. They all hit over 500 at their high school. They all have just tremendous power to all fields of all sides of the plate. It really is an embarrassment of riches at some of these schools.
Yeah, are you ready for what we have on the next slide for Georgia Tech? Because it's a lot.
I'm excited. Yeah, just
how small the font is on the right side for the freshmen. You got a ton of big name transfers. I'm really excited about Kyle Lodis. Shout out to Kyle, because I need Georgia Tech and Florida State to play so we can have the Lodi Bowl Part 2. We already had it Part 1 up in the Cape, but really excited for that. He may slot in at shortstop or second base. They have some open positions there, depending on where they want to play Carson Curse. The Goose is loose. John Giesler's back, so that gives them some flexibility at first and third. But who's jumping out at you on the transfer side?
Ken Schmidt, like it's a kind of a common theme. He's going to make that short drive within Georgia's. He was at Georgia Southern last year. He's going to be a guy that brings over a ton of pop. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Georgia Tech navigates some of the talent that they have, just because, I mean, they were so young last year and they had so many young guys that they really kind of counted on. But from a freshman standpoint, I think it has to be Drew Rogers. I mean, he has a short, super quick swing, almost two strike, has power to all fields and everything that I saw. His transfer from behind the plate, I think, could need a little bit of work, as he's somebody that I think could be a DH, and then you build him up into be a catcher. But he just has tremendous pop at the plate.
Yeah, you got to think about Vaughn Lackey started most of the games last year because of his defensive prowess, and Matthew Ellis DH'd a lot. That could be a similar situation for Drew Rogers, but I'm starting to think Drew Rogers might be on the All Jake. Might be an early candidate for the All Jake team as well. You've gotten to mention him every chance you've gotten when when we talk about the top 10 or recruiting classes. You must be.
I mean, like I said, when I was watching film on him, every single swing I was like, oh, it's just like his 2-strike approach, and every single one was the similar swing, and it's got. I mean, he's not like a small guy, like he really is built into his frame, but based on his swing, he has sneaky power. And he's somebody that I can see hitting 15 home runs this year in the ACC. He has that power.
Love that. And we already know that a Drew for Georgia Tech did that last year, right?
Who is that again, buddy?
Yeah, Drew Burris, who we will have an interview with at some point. Two pitchers I wanted to point out before I talked about Sam Swigert. Georgia Tech in the past, they've had some issues with pitching. Matt Taylor's done a pretty good job with being able to plug and play some guys. Tate McKee could take a big jump forward this year as a sophomore, but they lose Aiden Finateri. Cam Jones, unfortunately, had the 1 year he is gone. Sam Swigert is somebody that I like, but Caden Spivey and Caden Campbell are two guys that come from fellow ACC programs who didn't have the best years last year. Caden Campbell at Louisville, Caden Spivey at Notre Dame. I'd like to see if a change of scenery can help boost their stock once again. But Sam Swigert is a guy who made a ton of starts at the Citadel last year. He struck out 58 in 67 innings, 90-mile-an-hour fastball, good changeup, and then has a low 80s slider. So you're seeing a common theme with the pitches here, but I really like him, and I think he could be a big boost to this Georgia Tech pitching staff.
Do you know if they're going to get Terry Bussey back?
He is gone. He transferred.
He's gone. Same with Mason Patel too, as well.
So Mason Patel is back.
Oh, I thought he was a graduate student last year.
He is listed on their current roster of 16 returners.
I think this is the last year of the weird extra COVID year, by the way, because
that might be why he's got another year.
What?
That might be why he's got another graduate year.
Oh, yeah, because I thought he did 4 years at Georgia State, then grad transferred to Georgia Tech. But, like you kind of mentioned, Sam Swigert, I think, is the name that's going to be at the top of them. Logged a ton of innings over there at Citadel. Thorpe Muschke, I think, is another one that really kind of jumped out for me. Power pitcher. Again, it is high school, so take it with a grain of salt, but just unreal strikeout numbers when he kind of takes them out. It seemed like he averaged double-digit ones as I was going through. Really kind of short, quick motion, which I know a lot of coaches really like that from freshmen. Is they like him to get weird a little bit later. But I think that he's going to be one name that really kind of pushes for innings with Georgia Tech. And again, I'm going to make a prediction, Monty. I think one of those 6 on the right ends up being a Saturday starter for Georgia Tech.
I like it. Not a bad prediction, and I hope it goes well. We love Georgia Tech here on the show. I guess we love all the ACC teams. Moving along to Louisville, who we do have a little bit more information about because they have played 2 scrimmages plus several inter-squad scrimmages. They bring in a ton of great transfers. But the person I want to talk about before you get a chance is Tage Davis, who might be the opening day first baseman for them. He's already got 5 home runs in the fall. He hit 2 monster shots against Indiana last Sunday. Not this past Sunday, but I think the 22nd. Yeah. Just an absolute power guy. He's got the highest exit velocity of the fall for the team. I think he's going to be their everyday first baseman.
I'm going to go with Garrett Pike from Toledo. That's going to be the one that I know that feels weird, kind of cheating and taking the top one. First team all MAC, first team all defensive MAC too as well. Basically any award that you could win in the MAC, he won. He was a big reason why Toledo had a ton of success there. I think he's going to be a sub. I mean, but here's the thing with Louisville, and we kind of talked about it last year. Who knows what they're going to do? It feels like they do like line changes in and out with their outfield. And I mean, they have a ton of talent. That's the part that's crazy is I don't know if it's just because they have too much talent that it kind of hinders them, but it'll be interesting to kind of track who kind of wins playing time because, again, last year was definitely not up to the standard of Louisville baseball at all.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, they've got a lot of talent in the outfield again, and it's going to be difficult, I think, to pick the 3 guys out there. You've got Eddie King Jr.
I mean, last year they had, 5 guys that legitimately probably could hit over 300 for him?
Yep, you've got Eddie King Jr. back, Lucas Moore, and Zion Rose, who are all back, and then you've got Michael Lippy, who's really good, who's back. And then you've got Garrett Pike, who's a big-time transfer. You got Nate Early, who's a big-time JUCO transfer, played in the Cape. It's just going to be really interesting to see how that outfield shakes out. You've also got the shortstop competition to replace the departed Gavin Keelan with Tanner Shiver from Tennessee Tech and Bayram Hott, another guy from Marist. It's going to be really interesting. But on the pitching side, I like what they've got going on there. They didn't add a ton on in terms of transfer, but Brennan Cutts is very much like the Sebastian Gongora type that they did last year. And then Peter Michael has looked really good in his first 2 scrimmages. But, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be really interesting to see how they handle the playing time and see if they can get settled in quicker than they did last year.
Yeah, Colin Morey, I think, is another name to kind of watch. The notes that I have on him is he has raw power, raw arm. The swing kind of reminded me a little bit of Brody Donay. I think he's better defensively, but just a big, long, powerful swing. The thing to kind of note on him, though, is he is already 19, so he is a little bit more experienced than kind of your typical freshman. How Louisville kind of uses him, I think, Zion Rose isn't going to catch it all for him, right?
No, he is done catching. He made that move, made that decision over the summer.
So, I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting to see because, again, I don't think Morey can be an everyday catcher right this second in the ACC just based on some of the film that I've seen on him from a catching standpoint. But his bat has the chance to be in the lineup every single day. Like I said, I'm putting him on the All-Jake team simply because he reminds me of Brody Donay.
Yeah, it's going to be – I think it'll be difficult for him because Matt Klein and George Baker and Taggart Tyson are all so defensively, sound. And we know Matt Klein can hit. The other two should be able to hit as well. So it'll be tough, I think, for Colin Mowry to get that. But it's really just going to be interesting. I can't wait to watch more of this Louisville team, especially Tage Davis. Man, I'm so excited for that kid. He might be on the all-Monty team. We're already drafting our guys. Stop it. Moving along to the Miami Hurricanes, the U. They're back. I'm ready to say it. Look at that font. Look at how much transfers they got. Speaking of which, I'm going to take a moment to plug my interview for Thursday. On Thursday, we'll be dropping our interview with Griffin Hughes of Miami. That's right. Ranked number 287 right there, the third guy on the list for pitchers. Former Cincinnati two-way guy. He will be doing the the magic thing. Canes Cat Heat has to ask, how many players do we have to cut? I have no idea. You have a large roster, sir. But let's talk about Miami. Max Galvin is a guy whose the rankings have not been very nice to, but he had an incredible summer in the Northwoods League. Again, the outfield has a lot of options.
Yeah, this is interesting because, again, this is probably – I mean, there's 4 or 5 guys here that I really, really like.
I love 5 guys.
Yeah, 5 guys. 5 guys prize. Jake Ogden's if you remember back when UNCG beat Wake Forest on that Tuesday night, Jake Ogden had 2 hits in that game, and it was really kind of a big reason that they scored all their runs. I believe he scored a run, too, as well for him. He hit 318 for them – 313. Yeah, they're going to have – I think the limit's 35, so they're going to have to cut 10 people. 8 home runs. I think that he's kind of an old-school, typical infielder. Todd Hudson's a lefty bat that added a ton of power numbers. Longer swing, not a speed guy, kind of a prototypical corner outfielder. Marsh from Penn State, I think, is the other guy that you really have to circle. Was all freshman the Big Ten freshman of the year, and then last year he was first-team Big Ten. I think he's another one that you really kind of – but again, he's not a speed guy, so they have a ton of corner outfielders they're kind of projecting here. So it's going to be interesting to see where Miami goes from here because, again, I mean, this is a team that needed a complete roster overhaul.
Yeah, Canes Cat Heats brings up another issue is they don't have a true shortstop on their roster right now. That's going to be interesting. The starting position battle is going to be something we'll talk about, but I'm really intrigued by that. But I really, really like some of these pitchers. Obviously, I've watched every bit of Griffin Hughes's pitches in the Cape League multiple times. I had to do an article that involved him for Prospects Live, and he he's got some savvy stuff. He's a strike thrower. I really, really like him. He had a really monster summer, and he got better, and it got extended. I think Canes Cat Heat brings up a really, really good point that Hughes has never started, but he was putting in some starting innings in Cape, and I think he's got an absolute chance to be a starter. Should he get that opportunity, he can. He's been stretched out in the Cape. I mean, there were numerous times where he threw 5-6 innings. Really, really good pitcher, but he can also be a really good guy in relief. Another guy is Alex Giroux from Miami. But again, he's another reliever. He did start 5 games, but struck out 66 and only walked 14 in 65.2 innings. But he doesn't have like an elite fastball. It's like mid to upper 80s. But it's effective, and he's able to paint the corners.
So, Monty, let's say hypothetically there's 12 spots on every baseball team, 9 starters, including a DH, 3 weekend starters. How many freshmen do you think at Miami starts in ACC play that are freshmen? Because it does kind of feel like it's going to be a very freshman-dominated roster.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find out. I don't know. I think the outfield is going to be is you've still got Edgardo Villegas, and then you've got these guys coming in. I don't think any freshmen are going to start in the outfield. I don't think that many. I think you're going to see more opportunities on the pitching side than you would on the hitting side. But it's an interesting question.
I mean, it's just one of those that I said it in the pre-show, Monty, that this kind of has the feel of like what Florida State did last year, where they upgraded at a lot of positions. They lost a few guys that I think were talented but didn't really fit the culture. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where Miami goes from here, because I don't think Miami, and again, Canes Cat, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Miami's lived up to the standard of Miami baseball in the last 3-4 years at all. And
he would agree with that. But yeah, shortstop and first base are their main open spots, because you would think Tanner Smith's going to slide into that catcher position. So yeah, I would think that the pitching staff is probably going to get the first opportunity to make innings, but you're hoping it doesn't come to that, because if you're going to one of the freshmen as giving him a weekend starting opportunity, it's probably because none of the transfers have worked out. So it's going to be interesting, because some of these guys are going to get some opportunities, but it'll be a lot of fun to watch, and they've got some loaded stuff there. Let's move along to the North Carolina Tar Heels, another Omaha team. I talked about Kane Kepley earlier on the broadcast. He's a big-time guy. He's going to probably be the guy replacing Vance Honeycutt in center field. He's very good, but he's not Vance Honeycutt. You just got to remember that. Nobody is Vance Honeycutt. But it's a very, very big move there. But you've got some excitement going on the infield. Gavin Gallagher will be in the infield. I have an interview coming out with him in a couple of weeks. He was mentioning they're playing all the positions right now, second, short, and third, kind of having a kind of all-out battle, including Lee Sowers and Perry Hargett there with Gavin Gallagher and Alex Madera, as those guys try to figure out who's going to be in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, they're replacing a ton, I think, from a team that really went to that. Do you think they overachieved? Definitely, but I mean, they're replacing a ton. Like I kind of mentioned, Lee Sowers was committed to Virginia Tech forever. It seemed like he flipped kind of near the end. This guy generates a ton of power from a lefty swing. Big high leg kick. He kind of reminded me of Elijah McNamee, who played at Mississippi State a few years ago. Longer swing. The footwork, I think he definitely looks like a high school shortstop when you look at his footwork and you look at his arm. So I think he's somebody that they could kind of flip either to second or short. I think the bat will play long term, but he's going to be one that I know North Carolina was really, really excited to see. His bat's going to get him in the lineup.
Well, and you got to remember Hunter Stokely and Jake Knapp will be back. Jackson Vandebrake may be back as well. They're working on an eligibility issue, I believe, but they're getting some guys back. They do lose that entire outfield, which was the best in the ACC, with Vance Honeycutt, Casey Cook, and Anthony D'Onofrio. There we go. But you're returning some talent elsewhere, and Luke Stevenson behind the dish, but that pitching staff I think is very, very strong. And
a side note, Monty, I think that's going to be one that the Boaz aspect of it is Folger Boaz was a pitcher for him, and then Boaz Harper coming in as a recruit. So maybe the Boaz Bros, if they push for playing time, that'll be another good Monty meme opportunity. I really like Perry. I think it's Hargett or Hargett. We're going to have to get a pronunciation on that one too, Monty. When you see them, are you seeing them in the fall?
On Friday.
So if you could get a pronunciation, he's got a tremendous gap-to-gap swing. He's going to have to, I think, add a little bit of muscle, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong when you see him in person. But he's somebody that I think has the talent to be a starter for UNC in the future. Maybe not this year, but he's one guy that you kind of circle, and then Sawyer Black, I think, is another one. There's just a ton of talent that they're going to have to replace, and I think that a lot of these guys are going to be up to the task.
Yeah, and a guy I wanted to highlight, and I'm going to butcher the name, but Tom Chalewski, another Ivy League guy, Princeton. This is another guy that doesn't have an overpowering fastball, high 80s fastball, but has a really a lot of spin on his curveball, like 2,800, spin rate. Guy that can miss some bats. I really like that adjustment to add some more depth. And obviously Cameron Seagraves, another big pitching name that I'm really excited about for North Carolina. So a lot of questions, but I'm really excited. Again, I guess I can't stop saying how excited I am for ACC baseball.
We do get excited a lot for ACC baseball.
Yeah. Moving along to the NC State Wolfpack. And like I said, they didn't have to add too much. They do lose, two big bats in the middle of their lineup in Alec Makarevich and Garrett Pennington. They lose Jacob Cozart, but they're bringing back that slew of freshman arms. They're bringing back some talent. Friend of the program, Ryan Jaros, who, by the way, I'm going to plug his interview. It's tomorrow. But Ryan Jaros coming over from Georgia Tech, Chris McHugh coming over from VCU, Matt Osenfort, who was a huge recruit that didn't really get too much time at Vanderbilt. These are high ceiling guys.
Butterworth signed, right? He's not at NC State this year.
He is not. Nope. Justin DeCrisco is going to be the starting shortstop. I don't think they really have much of an option there. I think they have guys that could play there, but he's the best defensive option at shortstop.
And Jaros, I think, is a little bit too big to be a shortstop. But he was a guy that I remember us talking about last year when he was at Georgia Tech about being a stud freshman. I think the pedigree's there. I mean, he was the number 4 player in New Jersey. I think that there's a ton of talent there for him. I think Tyler Head is another guy that, as a freshman, you're really going to have to circle. I feel weird taking all the guys at the top, by the way, Monty, so stop me if I end up stealing too many of your guys.
Well, I did mention Tyler Head earlier. I do think he's probably going to get a chance to start right away.
Yeah, and so do you think NC State could have brought in better recruiting that they did, or do you think, like you said, it's just because they have so much talent that it was really kind of hard to get guys to commit to them?
I'm not sure.
Any kind of stock in that? Because I don't know. I feel like NC State should recruit a little bit better than they did this year.
They did lose a couple of guys to the draft too. You got to remember that.
Yeah, I guess that is true.
So, because I believe they had a really highly rated shortstop and another highly rated guy that both of them signed.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I said, I feel like the standard of NC State has really kind of been elevated in the last 2 or 3 years.
I feel like Stanford or NC State's done fine. I think these players are wonderful.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm excited. I get to see them on Friday as well. I'm pumped, man. I think they're going to have another big year. I mean, you got to think about the pitching staff they're bringing back with, Jacob Duden, who is a dude. Derek Smith, Jacob Duden supposedly working on a new pitch, by the way. He's probably going to be in the rotation.
I guess, yeah, you got to remind me of the pitching staff. I think
Cooper Consiglio,
yeah,
Ryan Marone, Heath Andrews, Jackson.
I guess that I have to take a step back and realize that they're not really replacing a ton, and that's why I need to kind of up the brakes on them.
And then Matt Willison's coming back from injury. They do lose some guys at the top end with Logan Whitaker and Sam Highfill, but they've already had the replacements ready and available, because I think there's a number of guys who didn't have the best freshman years that are going to have big jumps as sophomores.
All right, Monty, you've convinced me.
All right. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, when we do our deep dives closer to the season, once we learn a little bit more here in the fall season. I can't wait. I'm already chomping at the bit to talk about position battles and who's going to be in the rotation, who's going to be in the bullpen, who's going to be the go-to closer. I am in mid-season form, baby. Moving along to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They lose quite a bit, but they've got some things to be excited about. Jared Zimbardo is one of them. Dylan Hine is another from Arkansas State. I love that I decided not to add in what arms Jack Walker and Clark Gilmore throw with in this slide. I just decided they were pitchers. But yeah, lots to be excited about for Notre Dame. They return some quality guys in the likes of Estevan Moreno, who was an all-star for us last year. But who jumps out on the page to you for Notre Dame?
So I will say this. I know that I kind of made kind of a gross face. There's a lot of freshmen that I think you kind of have to sift through, because there are a lot of them that are really, really similar, that are kind of from some of these northern schools. So you don't really know what you're going to get, but I think that they're going to be a very, very freshman one. Brinson Waiters is, I think, the one that I saw that really jumped out to me when I watched some of the perfect game film about him. He has tremendous, tremendous power. I think it kind of carries. It's a little bit of a longer swing than I would like to see as somebody who's going to take that big, big step forward. But again, they brought in, I think, one of the better freshman classes that they've had, even going back to some of the Link Jarrett years, is they're a really, really talented freshman group. And just from a sheer numbers standpoint, I think that they're going to be one of the better freshman classes in the country.
Yeah, I think they're going to get a lot of opportunities, and it's exciting to see who in there. I mean, Jaden Knight and Jace Lee are two names in the outfield that are probably going to get some opportunities. I really can't wait for that. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame, it should be much improved.
Yeah, they're going to be one that's going to be very, very interesting to track going forward, because, again, they have so many disadvantages from a program standpoint in the ACC. Link Jarrett obviously took them to Omaha, knocked off a talented Tennessee team. So the standard is kind of set there. They are replacing a few graduate transfers and a few guys that transferred out. But again, I think that they're going to be much improved and kind of shock some people.
All right, now we get to talk about another team I love, Pittsburgh, baby. Let's look at that transfer class. That's a top 20 transfer class there on the left. Lorenzo Carrier coming over from Miami, David Padano from Dayton. Those are guys I think that are going to go straight into that outfield. You got AJ Nessler from UCF, Gavin Miller from Auburn. You return some quality guys like Jaden Melendez and Luke Cantwell and Jake Hendro and Ryan Zuckerman in the infield. It's just, I honestly am so excited to go see Pittsburgh. I'll see them this month as well when they host Mercyhurst. But the question is, what about the pitching?
The pitching was their strength last year. Luke Cantwell seemed to be Mr. Everything for him. So they're a team that I'm really, really excited about, that I'm trying to kind of hone myself in for and save all of my good nuggets for them when we talk about them in the deep dive. Gavin Miller from Auburn, I think, is the name that really, really jumps out to me. He kind of had a weird journey at Auburn where, Auburn last year honestly was a mess, and I think a change of scenery is going to be somebody that's going to be really, really good for them. I think that for as much as they surprised people last year, I think that Pitt surprises people even more. There's a ton to like about this Pitt team going forward. Like you said, the transfer class is top 20 in the country. Patrick Gardner, I think, is going to be a plug-and-play Friday night guy. There is a ton of stuff to like, which, again, when you and I first started doing this ACC show, it felt like we were kind of dogging on Pitt at times. And now, they're going to be, I think, in the top half of the ACC.
Let's
now
go.
You want to get my Pitt stuff on.
Pitt, baby, let's go. I'm excited about it. I think they are going to be better than last year. We've got, again, another opportunity for me to plug our player interviews. We've got Luke Cantwell in a couple of weeks. He had some great stuff to say, really exciting stuff. But Patrick Gardner,
I'm jealous. He's one of my favorite players that I think all in the entire country. I know he's on your team, Monty, as a Monty guy, but we might have to work out some kind of trade for Luke Cantwell.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. They do lose, Phil Fox on the pitching side, Jack Sokol, Ryan Andrade, but Patrick Gardner is going to help. Drew Lafferty, Andrew Gaines, these are guys, and then I think Aiden Coleman's going to take a huge jump. And again, I shouldn't be spoiling stuff because he's not a transfer or a recruit, but he's going to take that freshman to sophomore jump. But I'm really excited about this Pittsburgh team. I cannot wait to get out to Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks.
I'm excited. I'm very jealous. I need to fly up there to Pittsburgh for a game this year.
Yeah, because you got to fly there and they weren't there. But moving along to...
I'll be there over Christmas, so I'll get to see the field itself, but I will get to see the team itself.
Moving along.
It's a very underrated ballpark. I will say this. For those that are in the Pittsburgh area, it's a truly underrated ballpark. Honestly, I had very, very low expectations for it, and it's one of the nicer parks that I think I've seen.
Yeah, but Stanford, we have no transfers to speak of, but the big name who is not ranked because he's an international star, Rintaro Sasaki. He's been with the team. I found out when I talked to Court McDonald a couple weeks ago. Rintaro was with the team all last year, so he's getting that culture shock and that language barrier a little bit ahead of the game, so he's going to be ready to focus on baseball. He had an interesting summer, had some swing and miss issues in the draft league, but he's got prodigious power. He's somebody who could be working his way into the pros right now for the Japanese league. He is going to be a potential player of the year candidate for the ACC, I think, right away. I think he could have a Drew Burress-like impact for Stanford.
How does that work for his eligibility if he was with the team last year? Is he going to be a quote-unquote freshman?
No, he's a freshman. He was just with the team. Like, he wasn't on the team. He was with the team.
Which, I mean, international stuff honestly kind of gets a little bit tricky with everything. So, like I said, I mean, we might even be wrong about that just because we're not familiar with the international aspect of it. Yeah, his ceiling is Golden Spikes. I know that seems kind of crazy to think about, but he really did forego the draft and, like you said, to come over here. So you need to think about him kind of as a 1-1 best. He might be the best international player to ever play college baseball. I don't even think that that's an outrageous thing to say. He has tremendous power. He has that smooth kind of Japanese swing where the ball just kind of carries out. He is going to play first base for him. I think that there's very few guarantees in the world, but I think Sasaki being first baseman is one of them. But Charlie Bates, I think, is another guy that's going to fly quote unquote under the radar just because
of Sasaki.
A lot of the headlines. He's going to be a plug and play shortstop. He has tremendous power. Again, perfect game stuff. So take it with a grain of salt. He looked really smooth fielding ground balls. He almost looked like a big leaguer fielding ground balls. He's got a Braden Montgomery type swing. That what I saw. I don't think he has the power that Braden Montgomery has. I don't think he has the arm strength that Braden Montgomery has. But his swing reminded me a ton of Braden Montgomery's when he took hacks. Again, smooth at short, really fluid release, big league type fielding ground balls.
Yeah, it's funny. They don't really need any transfers in. I think Stanford could contend for the ACC title because you got to remember how good their pitching staff could be. I think those struggles they had last year are going to pay dividends this year. I think they needed to have one of those years after 3 straight trips to Omaha. I think they have the ability to compete. And I think Charlie Bates and Rintaro Sasaki are going to be big reasons why they're going to be able to compete for that conference title in year 1.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff to like, which, again, we'll spend more time on Stanford with the deep dive, but Charlie Bates could be a Drew Burress. I know that we keep kind of saying that, but he could be a Drew Burress, not just all ACC freshman. I think he could be an all ACC or at least second team ACC.
Hey, we haven't kept saying it. We've only said it twice now, so we're good. And we've said
I should say that there's a ton of openings at shortstop where there's a lot of guys that aren't necessarily everyday fits that you're just going to have to play shortstop. And that's not really the case with him at all. Like I said, he has a tremendous release from short.
Yeah, Virginia gets a former big-time recruit from that went to Florida originally, then to JUCO, is going to be playing both ways for Virginia. Chris Arroyo is a name that I would expect to see a lot of. He's going to pitch and hit at Virginia. It's already been confirmed by Brian O'Connor in an interview we had, in a press conference he had first day of fall. I would not be surprised if Chris Arroyo starts at first base with Henry Ford moving to right field. There's options at first base for Virginia because you've obviously got Antonio Parada, Chris Arroyo, and Aiden Harris in that mix. But he's the transfer, even though he's a JUCO, that's most intriguing to me.
Yeah, I think you all but confirmed that Henry Ford's going to be at right field, correct?
Henry Ford himself confirmed it.
Chris Arroyo, like you said, is going to contend for playing time, if not be the everyday first baseman. Aiden Harris, just gaudy numbers when you go look at it. Like he was top 10 at the MLB draft combine that they did back in June, 0.3 behind Hunter Hines, who's a grown man, and that's his big tool is hitting the ball super far. A little bit of a longer loopy swing, but again, the power is just on display. Good raw power. I think UVA is a perfect fit, and this feels weird saying. I think he's a future first rounder. He has that kind of pop. He has that kind of coaching staff that like I said, he's got a few things to work on. And in some of the video I saw, he kind of drags his back when he comes through. But again, the power is on display every single time. And scouts kind of perk up when he comes up to the plate.
Yeah, the tricky part for Virginia, or for him at Virginia, is I don't know if any of the freshmen are going to start, because it's looking like you could have an outfield of Teal, Didewick, and Ford, and then an infield of Arroyo / Parada, Ferentz behind the plate. At second base, you'd have Becker, shortstop, Godbout, third base, Hansen, and there's not really any place to put someone. But we'll see. I think Aiden Harris might have the best chance to start. Sarah is getting an opportunity to get some competition at shortstop with those other guys that we just mentioned that are playing in the other positions. But I really love the two lefties in Valencius and Kirk. Those are two guys that are guys that are going to get opportunities. Virginia struggled at times with the pitching last year. They do return Evan Blanco and Jay Wolfhook. Jay Wolfhook hopefully turned a corner in the postseason last year. But, Jack O'Connor and Bradley Hodges, their statuses are still up in the air with the injuries they suffered last year. So they're going to need these reinforcements on the mound. And the high ceiling guys in Valencius and Kirk are really exciting. But, yeah, I might be seeing Virginia on Wednesday. I'm excited to see these guys in action.
You've seen them in person this year already, right?
I saw them in practice, but the roster wasn't released. So then, it was a very brief little bit of practice. I didn't see him take BP or anything, so I haven't seen much.
How does Aiden Harris move at third base? Do you think that he's somebody that could play third base at the D1 level? Just because I think that's not a knock on him or anything like that. It's just everything I've seen has just been him at the plate. And
I didn't see enough yet. I'll have to keep an eye out when I go on Wednesday if I go.
Because, again, if he can play third base just based on his size and his bat, that's a tremendous plus for Virginia. It's another spot that they can play him at.
Yeah, and shout out to Thomas Valencius. He comes from the Baylor School, which has already produced Henry Ford and Henry Godbout. So third straight year that Virginia pulls in a kid from the Baylor School at Tennessee. So there's a nice little pipeline going on there. All right, Virginia Tech. All right, Jake's Virginia Tech Hokies. All right, Anderson French is a guy. He's a freshman. I know we're going to talk about the transfers, but he's a guy that Prep Baseball had ranked in the top 5. Another catcher, Virginia Tech loves just collecting talented catchers. They've already got Henry Cook and David McCann ready to roll heading into the spring. But if Anderson French is a guy like Brody Donay or David McCann last year who can force his bat in the lineup, he could see a lot of time at DH. But who really jumps out at you on the page here?
Hold on, let me get my notes out on this one, Monty, if you don't mind.
Well, in that case, I will continue talking because David Lewis is legit. If Bourne had won the Cape Cod championship, he would have been the MVP of that championship series. He had a monster 3 games against Harwich for that championship. Originally at Clemson, things didn't, go the way he wanted to at Clemson. He goes to a smaller school. Now he's at Virginia Tech, and he can hit the ball. So the Hammer and Hokies continue to get guys that can hammer the baseball.
Just to kind of piggyback off that, Grant Hunter is the one that I had notes on. I put this feels again. I feel like I've said this about everybody, but he has tremendous raw power. Not quite as strong as some of the other Virginia Tech guys. I think he can grow into his body a little bit more, but he has super quick hands. Seems like he has a very advanced approach. A few of the stats that I read up on him. Grant Hunter's I think going to be one guy that we can see down the road being in there. David Lewis, I think, is another guy that has tremendous pop. Like you kind of mentioned, that's the other guy I had notes on. Sorry about that, Monty. But, there's a lot of openings, I think, at Virginia Tech this year. Like, there's going to be a lot of guys that started for him last year that I think are going to be pushed for playing time by some of these freshmen. And Virginia Tech, they have an identity as a team, and I think that they stick to it this year.
Yeah, and Garrett Michelle's back from injury. Clay Grady will be at short. You've got Ben Watson at center field, and then I think you could have some openings elsewhere. And obviously the catcher position's kind of figured out with McCann and Cook. But other than that, you've got some openings there in the outfield and second base and third base. It's going to be really interesting. But Brandon Yagesh is a guy, they need pitching. They return, obviously, Renfro and Griffin Stieg in the rotation. But we know Virginia Tech can always use more depth. That could have been a huge benefit had they gotten a little bit more depth down the stretch last year. But this is a lefty that, can be a starter or a reliever. He comes from Mount St. Mary's. He's another one of those veteran pitchers that we love to see. Maybe not the biggest draft prospect, but he's a high 80s fastball guy with good command that can mix in the slider, curveball, and changeup.
Yeah, there's a ton of ACC guys that we've kind of said that about over the past few years, where
I think those guys get undervalued. And you've seen Virginia find that value and lead them to Omaha with it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams I think are trying to recreate that. That's the other part too. Is a lot of these teams steal stuff from other ones, but again, Virginia's Tech, they've really kind of swung the bat, and I think that they're addressing a lot of their pitching shortfalls that they've had the last few years, because it really has been the thing that's kept them out of even the tournament is the pitching staff. And, they really addressed it last year where they had a lot of starters that they relied on. And then this year, I think they really went after a lot of high-end starting pitching that is going to push for playing time.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to watch. I get to see them on Sunday. They're
just everywhere, man.
Well, hey, no, actually, Virginia Tech's nice enough. They're coming to me. They're playing at VCU.
Playing at the Richmond.
Yeah,
Richmond
they're playing.
field?
Yep, they're playing at VCU. So that's nice of them.
No, they're not playing at the Spiders field, or not?
No. They're playing at the Diamond with. They're playing at the Squirrels. That's where VCU plays. So it should be fun. But last team, but not least, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. I think outside of Miami, this is one of the most fun pitching staffs to kind of speculate on and prognosticate on. It's going to be a wide open battle. It's the first time, I think, in Corey Mascara's stay that he doesn't have, most of the pitching staff most of the starting rotation figured out. It's wide open. All 3 guys that started last year are gone. You bring in some big name guys like Bedford and Lunsford and Dallas. Griffin Green from Virginia Tech, who missed the last year and a half with Tommy John surgery. Then you've got, the talented freshmen in Chris Lavonis and Duncan Marston. But then you've also got Blake Morningstar and I'm trying to remember Hayden LeFew. So it's just a lot of excitement to go. Corey Mascara must be really excited about this pitching staff. Logan Lunsford's another guy. I watched every one of his innings against in the Cape Cod. He's got a fantastic changeup. It's his best pitch. Fastball that can reach up to 93, 94. Matthew Dallas is another name that's really exciting. Another Tennessee volunteer following a Chase.
I was going to say, is he from Tennessee?
Yeah.
Okay, because I knew the name sounded familiar.
Yep, but who stands out to you?
Dalton Wentz, like you said, that 59 by his name. He's one that a few other publications have him a lot higher. Just a rocket of an arm at shortstop. I think he caught a little bit too in high school, but again, he's got tremendous range. He looks very, very smooth. All of his balls, he's not taking 2-3 crow hops like the perfect game, quote unquote, jokes are. I think the bats really well. And then, like you said, the pitching staff, they kind of got back to the basics a little bit. You know, a lot of people, there were murmurs that, oh, the pitching lab isn't as good. Just had high-end talent come in, and that's why it's good. Well, they're going to nip that in the bud. They brought in a ton of guys that I think are going to push for playing time, which, again, I think that this might be one of the best staffs in the ACC.
They've got a ton of guys with Friday night experience, too, because I didn't even mention Luke Schmoke, who was the Friday night starter for Georgia Tech 2 years ago. Logan Lunsford was the Friday night starter for Missouri. Griffin Green was a Friday night starter for Virginia Tech. Matt Bedford was a Friday night starter for Notre Dame. And now they're getting that pitching lab. And if you guys haven't had a chance, I'm plugging it again. I had an interview with Will Ray. He talked about what that pitching lab can do. One of the things that, like even little things, he mentioned a nice little anecdote about Rhett Lauder and orthopedics and how it helped his fastball jump another mile or 2 miles an hour. But the other guy I'm circling, we talked about Ethan Conrad earlier in the show. He's probably in the first round pick conversation, but Jimmy Keenan, they didn't have the success at the catcher position with transfers last year that they did the year before. They're hoping to get that with Jimmy Keenan, who was a really, really good catcher for St. John's. I saw him play in the Charlottesville Regional last year, and when you looked at that St. John's lineup, he was the one guy that you circled because he was the one guy with really double-digit home runs. I think he's going to be a big boost to that offense.
I didn't realize that's who that was, by the way, because I saw St. John's very, very, very early in the season before a lot of their kind of gaudy numbers had come out. I saw them when they played at Houston. I think it was a midweek, actually. But yeah, I mean, he was definitely the best player on that St. John's team going forward. You mentioned that Luke Costello, I think, is another thing that really jumps out to me. But I think Reese Bowie, he's another guy where I don't think you'll see him this year. But I think if he gets into the lab, adds a few miles per hour to that fastball, gets a little bit better with his command, I think he's somebody that you could really kind of see take a big step forward for Wake Forest.
Yep, and I'm going to get a chance to see Wake Forest on the 27th, so against West Virginia. So
you'll have to tell me how Dalton Wentz looks in person. He's a switch hitter, like I said, but his frame, he doesn't really strike me as somebody who looks like a college freshman coming in.
Yeah, oh man. We just talked baseball for an hour and a half. I could probably talk more, but I was trying to speed us up there because we could just keep talking. Jake and I are going to do the deep dives. Micah might do the deep dives with us when we do I think starting I'll probably still do it in the first week of January. We'll probably just have to do 3 shows in a couple of weeks just to make sure we catch up to the numbers on the 2 extra teams. But it's a lot of exciting stuff. Again, we're going to talk position battles. We're going to talk scrimmages over the next month. Jake is going to get a lot of information from me on those scrimmages since he won't necessarily be able to be here in person unless he gets off his butt and flies out here and,
I mean, just based off my fall schedule, everything's going to be I'll see A&M this Friday. I'll see Texas State at the end of the month. I'll see Rice in November. I'll see a few JUCO guys. I'll see Blinn, McLennan, San Jack. So kind of the next generation coming in. And then Oklahoma State too as well. So unfortunately, no ACC fall over yet, but conference realignment's always a thing. So
stop it. All right. So real quick before we go, I want to reach out every Monday this month. Jake and I will be doing a talk show kind of like this, hopefully a little bit shorter than this, but we'll see. But every Tuesday and Thursday at 8:00 Eastern, we also have player interviews. Those can also be seen in our live library on YouTube, so you can go back and watch them. We've already done Macon Winslow of Duke, Garrett Michelle of Virginia Tech, Patrick Roche of Boston College, Court McDonald of Stanford, Will Ray of Wake Forest. He was fantastic. Ryan Jaros is coming out tomorrow night. Patrick Forbes is another one that we've done of Louisville. He's projected to be the Friday night guy for Louisville. But Ryan Jaros of NC State's tomorrow night. Griffin Hughes is coming up on Thursday. And then over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Luke Cantwell of Pitt, Gavin Gallagher of North Carolina, Aiden Kanak of Clemson, Estevan Moreno. Yep, Estevan Moreno of Notre Dame, Jamie Arnold of Florida State, top
that's another good
draft pick, Jared Advincula of California, Berkeley, and then Drew Burris of Georgia Tech, and Henry Godbout of Virginia. Jake, which of those are you most looking forward to?
I would say Henry Godbout. He's somebody that we got to be around down in Virginia. We got to talk to him a little bit. I think the baseball IQ just oozes out of him. Jamie Arnold, he's another one. Gosh, man, I'm kind of jealous. You get to hang out with all these guys again. I feel like seeing all these guys, talking with them.
Yeah, I'm excited, and it's great to get them out there and talk to them a little bit about baseball, and excited to get those guys in, and we might even have more because I might double up on some teams because there were some guys that were like, I want to be interviewed, so we might do that.
Get Wallace Clark, man.
Yeah. Well, he's hard to get, man. He plays hard to get, but that's going to be it for us. Jake, do you have any final thoughts before we finish it up for the night?
So I did have one question. Are we going to refer to Cal as Cal or Cal Berkeley? Because I think that's something that we need to establish.
I don't think we need to establish it. They're the same. I
don't know. I always forget that Cal is Cal Berkeley because they're like their whole branding is just Cal.
Right, because they are the main campus. But that's, I mean, it's like saying UNC Chapel Hill. You could say that, and it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, so we're sticking with Cal then? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, that's fine. We can stick with Cal if that makes it easier for you, Jake. But that's going to be it. Jake's final thought was a question, and it was a dumb one. So Jake is back. He's in mid-season form, the jester. But for Jake, I'm Monty. We'll be back next week. But in the meantime, we've got player interviews Tuesday and Thursday. So enjoy. This is fall ball. We're back. We're looking forward to the 2025 season. Take care, y'all.
We're here.